From the former convent of the Good Shepherd overlooking Inwood Hill Park in New York City, welcome to Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home what we affectionately call Upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we welcome musician Frank Coleman. Frank Coleman has had a long career collecting hyphens. He is a musician, composer, writer, editor, filmmaker, animator, producer, director, designer, and software developer, and also a former child actor. Frank appeared in 2 film productions picked by Time magazine as top of the decade in 1969 before retiring at the ripe old age of 10. He studied percussion and electronic music at Berklee College of Music, eventually developing an interest in integrating technology into live performance. This led to a long, successful career in new media encompassing over 500 projects since 1990, including the first CD-ROM, the first interactive music site on the internet, and the first website to receive an Emmy nomination. He's also a professional rock drummer with an extensive discography and has performed in front of over 40,000 people, most notably with John Ashton, formerly of the Psychedelic Furs. Returning to his theater roots with his partner, playwright Bambi Everson, they've released 6 volumes of her work in paperback over the last year and had a sold-out run at the 2019 New York Fringe Festival, and also co-hosts a web series on cinema. We're going to talk to him about his music and so much more, but first, let me welcome you, Frank, to Inwood Art Works On Air. Thanks for being here.
Than't you so much.
Surprised you had a moment to even arrive here.
You got it. Okay.
Jeez, Pete's.
Well, I'm a drummer, so I'm used to doing, something different with each of my limbs, at 90 miles an hour with Swiss watch precision with everybody counting on me. That's the job.
You are a walking Swiss Army knife, sir.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's great to see you.
Thank you. I'm honored and deeply flattered to be here. Thanks. It's great. And I love Inwood, and we love the neighborhood, and I love being a part of it.
No, ditto, man. I created a company. I loved it so much. I created a company about it.
There you go.
And I have to ask you off the top, though, since you brought it up in the bio, the first thing. So what are the 2 movies?
Actually, one asterisk there. Not movies, stage production.
Stage production, sorry.
Yeah, because it was theater.
Productions.
Yeah, my story is pretty unlikely. I mean, if there weren't copious amounts of documentary evidence, I would kind of have a hard time believing it. But I was actually reading when I was 2, and when I was 4.5, I had my first professional production appearance for Joe Papp for playing Macduff's son at the American Shakespeare Society in Stratford.
Wow.
I do remember this, actually. My mom refreshed my memory. I actually had Hamlet's soliloquy memorized as my audition piece. I was 4.5.
Wow.
And I walked in and they hired me on the spot because, if a 4.5-year-old walks in and does Hamlet's soliloquy, I would hire him. I don't know for what, but geez, man, so anyway.
Or you ask his mom, why's the kid so depressed all the time?
So, yeah, wandering on moping, but yeah, but no, that is true. And that led to 4 productions for Circle in the Square.
Wow.
And the first one was The Trojan Women. This is 1966, and that's how I got my equity card. I was actually the youngest member of Actors Equity, the Actors Union, in the United States at the time.
I believe it.
In 1966. And then we toured nationally with The White Devil, John Webster's The White Devil. My mom and dad were also actors and singers, opera singers first and then folk singers later. So we did a lot of work together.
Yeah.
And my dad and I were both in The White Devil and toured nationally with
Wow.
that.
You never hear John Webster's White Devil being done.
I know. And years later, I ended up working with Echo and the Bunnymen and becoming very good friends with them. And they have a whole song about the White Devil.
Yeah.
Funny as that is. So there was that. So the Trojan Women was the first one.
Okay.
The second one was Iphigenia in Aulis, also by Euripides, also at Circle in the Square. And that was 1968. That was with Irene Pappas and Christopher Walken.
Wow.
And I was 8. Right? I was 8 years old. And we alternated parts, me and the other kid. The other kid was Paris Themin, who went on to be Mikey TV and in Willy Wonka and all like that. Yeah. So, actually Frank Langella was in for a week and then he had to leave for some reason. They brought in Chris Walken, who was just Chris Walken at the time.
Sure.
He was like 23, I think. He wasn't a star yet.
No. Did he do the I wonder if he did Lion in Winter yet, because he was also the first Prince John in Lion in Winter.
I don't know. I don't know the chronology.
Yeah.
But that ran for a while. But those are the two Euripides things. And then the last thing that I did was All Wilderness at the Ford Theater That was 1969, and that was actually the first production at Ford since Lincoln's assassination.
Wow.
Yeah, and they gave us a party at the Senate, and I have my photo with Jacob Javits and the whole bit. And it was 1969. I remember that very distinctly, and I very distinctly remember, because Nixon was president, the smell of tear gas coming over the Washington Mall because of all the protests. That was very, very distinct memory.
So
yeah.
I'd retire at 10 too after all that work. Jeez and Pete's.
That was enough. It's
Holy
like that's
mackerel.
enough to
Well,
be, hard-boiled.
Mea culpa. I for some reason I thought Time Magazine was focusing on film productions,
well, they
let
did
alone theater.
Yeah, they did the
gotcha.
top of the decade
Yeah.
in all the different, film and theater and dance and et cetera.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Well, learn something new here, folks. I tell you, guys, a walking history book. So did you after that? What else is there achieved in the acting world? So did your mom pull you out, or are you just like you're kind of done with it and different interests?
No, it was actually more dramatic than that. My dad got sick and died.
Wow.
Yeah. He was 35. He didn't know he had high blood pressure, didn't drink or smoke. This was like 1970, right?
Yeah.
So high blood pressure wasn't even on people's radar back then.
Sure.
And he got the flu and it knocked out his kidneys and he died.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Wow.
And by that point, as fate would have it, again, more unlikely stuff, as fate would have it, we moved upstate to Cooperstown, where we had done summer stock one year. And a couple of years later, some other opera-loving friends of my mom encouraged her to get involved with a production company. They wanted to start a new opera company.
Yeah.
She still had all her costumes. Right, so we put on the first production of La Boheme at the local high school with her costumes. This eventually became the Glimmer Glass Opera, and then the Glimmer Glass Festival, where Stephen Sondheim has come up and done, speaking and on Otsego Lake. Well, my stepdad was the treasurer for the first 13 years. The whole thing was put together at our kitchen table, and he went out and got the land from our friend Tom Goodyear, who we had worked with when we did summer stock, and he donated all his land for the opera house on the lake. And, the rest is history. And also, it must be said, I am a product of the Cooperstown High School Music Department, and I am a very, very passionate advocate for music and arts education in public schools. Excuse me. Because you don't have a well-rounded education without it. You really don't. You just don't.
For some reason, I don't know what happened the past 25 years, but the arts have been just marginalized more than ever. I know it may not have been the coolest thing to be at school at some point for some people, whatever, but I don't know how those people got in charge, because all of a sudden, past 25 years, we've seen it just being squeezed out of programming and the whole quote budget cuts and things like that. Totally couldn't agree more. The best liberal arts education, liberal arts, exactly. It's all part of it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, key skills that you get from this type of study include improvisation. The ability to just pull something out of your hat, in an emergency. You're not going to get that from science and technology and engineering and math. The MacGyver effect. Something bad is going to happen in 3 minutes. You got a ballpoint pen and a roll of masking tape. What are you going to do? Right. That's creativity. You've got this idea in your head. You got something. How are you going to make it real?
Yeah, man.
Make something out of nothing. All those skills.
Well, you have collaboration. You learn how to discipline. You learn. There is math in music, obviously.
Sure, of course.
There's just stating the obvious here. But more than also, there's just your simple listening, just simple listening.
Sure.
Which I don't think I have a line that I've said for a long time, and I learn more by listening than talking. And you may not know it by knowing me hosting a podcast program, but it's fortunately, kids, it comes with the territory. I got to speak for the show. But seriously, though, it's just there's a lot of things lost, the 3 R's, so to speak, and sports too. I think sports and entertainment, arts, you lose a lot, and also the relationships, learning from other people. I mean, what people bring to the table, because we were talking an earlier podcast this year about, it's about the whole. It's like your high school band is a band. It's not one guy, or girl. It's a group of people working in quote unquote concert to put something forward. Same thing if you're doing, the high school production of La Boheme. I definitely do it, or Brigadoon, or whatever they're doing. Music Man, and they're pushing it forward. Hamilton these days, I guess, right? Or Frozen, but there's value to all of that, and which is I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. It It does make an enormous difference, and it, I think, starts with a committed teacher.
Yeah.
Probably, that's what we had there. Somebody who was like, I'm gonna
I
make
said,
this.
It's about the
thing.
higher ups deciding, and
Yeah.
well, that was our PSA, folks. If you guys,
But
didn't
it's
wanna know
true,
anything
and
about
actually,
that,
there was a whole bunch of people
And
from
I'm a
that
son
community.
of two teachers too,
Yeah.
so I totally get it.
Yeah.
And well, I don't have an educational program here at Inwood Art Works, but if we did, you're kind of listening to it now. But you came full circle, actually, though, back to your theater roots in 2019 when you collaborated with Bambi on the new play at the Fringe.
This is true.
Tell us about it.
Well, Bambi and I have an equally unlikely story. We were actually in 3rd and 4th grade together in PS 87 in the Upper West Side. And her dad is William K. Everson, and he was sort of like the dean of film criticism. He's actually the originator, in many ways, of film criticism as a thing. He wrote the very first books of film criticism back in the 50s and 60s, and taught film at NYU and was Marty Scorsese's teacher and all these people's teacher and mentor, and had the largest private motion picture collection in the country in their apartment. No television, just 5,000 films on reels and an enormous projection screen.
Dad, don't watch the Maltese Falcon again.
Seriously,
Jeez.
no. Bambi says her first 3 words were Mama, Daddy, and Kong.
True.
Right? So anyway, I was the first boy she ever loved, and she knew I was into famous monsters of Filmland and all this, so I had one stuck in my book bag, so she was like, you like monster movies? Why don't you come over to my house on Friday night? My daddy's showing Dead of Night, And I was like, really? Yeah.
Like, that's not a come on. I've never heard of one in my life.
It's like, yeah, sure. He has a room full of monster movies. And I was like, yeah, sure he does. But yeah, sure enough, he did. And so I was over there every weekend watching the classics projected in their living room. So we had this really tight bond from all the way back then. But we got separated in 5th grade and had to wait 35 years for the invention of Google to find each other again.
Wow.
That was 20 years ago.
There are some good things the internet brings around. Yeah.
So exactly. Technology is always a double-edged sword. It giveth and it taketh away.
I said
right?
some things. Yeah, and save
it's always a Faustian bargain.
Yeah. Well, so
now
the play. You guys.
Well, Bambi went back to school in 2015. After 37 years, I had this personal renaissance and discovered that she wanted to write stories and tell stories. She's written 30 plays since then, a half a dozen full lengths and a bunch of one acts. And we've been, like I said at the beginning, publishing them in paperback, and in paperback only, actually, not on Kindle. And the reason for that is because, looking at, just one day I said to her, after probably losing another hard drive, we've got books in the library that are 100 years old, and I don't think I've ever met a hard drive that made it to its 5th birthday.
Right.
And so if we want this stuff to last, let's put it in paper.
Totally.
So we did. That's what we're doing.
Awesome.
And, I have to say, for all of the legitimate issues that we have with Amazon, they sure do make it easy for you to publish your own book. And I got to tell you, the royalty arrangements are fair, damn it.
Well, and what is the name of the play so people can go out and check it out?
So Bambi is at BambiEverson.com. Yeah. You can also find her on Amazon.com, Amazon.com/author/Bambi Everson.
Right. What was the name of the play at the Fringe
Festival?
The
very first one.
Yeah.
The one that really cracked the ice was The Thin Man in the Cherry Orchard, which is a mashup of Dashiell Hammett and Chekhov.
I got that.
Nick and Nora go to visit their Russian cousins out in the tundra, right? And naturally, there's a murder, and Nick has to solve it before they run out of vodka, And it's great.
It's great.
I mean, fully admitting my bias, it's friggin' hilarious.
Well,
and so she wrote a sequel also, which is Nick and Nora Go Off Broadway, which we also just did a reading of, and that's sort of like The Thin Man meets Waiting for Guffman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very meta.
So so her stuff is. She's written very, very dark stuff and very, very, very funny stuff.
Very cool. So you have your marching orders, folks. If you want to check it out, he just gave you the keys of the kingdom. Well, I hope it continues to do well for both of you.
Thank you.
And I'm sure it's being licensed out. Maybe at Cooperstown High School they could do it up there. You never know.
Wonders never cease. We'll see what happens.
All right, let's switch gears to music. So about what age did you find your way behind a drum kit since you were too busy on stage, making things happen with Iphigenia?
Right. Well, we had a piano in the house because my mom and dad were singers, and dad and mom were both giving also voice lessons to their friends all the time, too.
Yeah.
And so one day we also had a piano teacher up on the 12th floor of our building, Mr. Herman Diaz, who was actually a very prominent Cuban pianist. There's a documentary just came out about him. And one day my dad sat me down at the piano and showed me major, minor, augmented, diminished, here's the map, right? And I was like, great. I just started kind of getting into it and took piano lessons for a few years and all like that. And, just kind of fudged my way through it the way one does at that age and all like that. But around about a little later after that, we were over at a friend's place and they played this new album called Switched On Bach, right? And our friend had a really fancy stereo system with an oscilloscope, a little tiny blue oscilloscope on the amplifier so you could see the music go while it was playing. And I was absolutely fascinated by this, seeing the music. Right, the notion that music could be made visible was just suddenly like this light bulb going off in my head. That and my dad taking me to see Fantasia, again, that theme of, sort of crossing lines between different sense organs, very Cronenbergian kind of thing. So that is what sparked my interest in technology to try to basically paint with music, light and sound together at the same time. And eventually now the technology has eventually caught up.
And you went to Berkeley.
And I went to Berkeley and
so
studied electronic music.
You to do that and pursue like a career.
Oh, yeah, it all kind of led ineluctably to that. But the drums happened one day when somebody got me an album of Elton John's soundtrack to the movie Friends, which features probably the ugliest album cover in history. The entire thing is Pepto-Bismol pink. And it's just, it's like, I know you're having a hard time hearing me over this album cover, but there's a song on the end of side one called Can I Put You On? And halfway through, Nigel Olsson goes into double time. And the whole song just kind of downshifts into second
ever.
and absolutely. Phil's 9 miles wide. You could drive a truck through, just fantastic. Create space, not fill it.
That's super cool. You mentioned Niles.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, Nigel Olsson, fantastic. Yeah. So that, it was like that, bingo, I'm going to be a drummer. Yeah. That was it. And shortly after, I got my first drum set, and my parents didn't know how to set it up. And they set it up left-handed, even though I'm right-handed.
Did
so I learned
encourage
left-handed.
you, or they like, no, you should go to
piano? Well, they were all musicians, So all our friends were musicians and singers and all like that.
Why
so,
they set up left-handed? Why did they do that?
They didn't know any better.
Or they said like
what do they know from
we need
drum
a strong
set?
left hand from
It's
you.
a Montgomery Ward's drum set. It's 1972.
Right.
Who knows, right? So they set up. What do I know? I sit down. I start. But I'm right-handed, so I started playing the stereo with my dominant hand.
Right,
so for rock and roll, I think the backbeat is a little more hotter. Punchy that way.
Wow.
But Ringo was actually the same way.
Do you still play left-handed?
Yeah. Although, as a survival skill, I had to learn right-handed as well because all the other drummers in high school were right-handed.
Right.
So I had to learn how to play right-handed too. And then by the time I got to Berkeley, I started playing right-handed on my left-handed kit, and all my other drummer friends you bastard.
Show off. I'm sure a lot of Berkeley kids show off those. So it's probably not the worst thing in the world. I'm sure
it's an amazing place. You just go set up your drums at 2 a.m. and just go wail, concert volume level.
So were you also into new wave music?
Absolutely.
As well, and stuff like that? I figured that kind of would influence you a little bit.
Yeah, I landed in Boston in 1977, September of 1977. Boom, right? And but when I got there, I was really into Rush and fusion and stuff like that.
The prog rock was electronic too.
Yeah. By the end, 3 months later, I was listening to the Sex Pistols in the Jam and
Moog synthesizers and things like that.
Well, I always loved electronic music, and I never lost my love for that. And there was a punk branch of the electronic wing too. People like the Normal and so on and so forth.
Sure.
And Suicide and lots of other groups. So. I always try to use whatever technology was excellent at the time to just try to push things forward.
Yeah.
And just try to find, what's next and make weird stuff.
Well, I think you're definitely accomplishing that, my friend. But obviously, it opened up a lot of doors for your hyphenated career. Because when I think of Fred Coleman, I think of rock drummer, but you have all these other influences, and you play with a ton of people, obviously. And I think the fact that you're so versatile, and you have that sensibility I'll call it an appreciation for other forms, allows you to play with a lot of different people, like the Psychedelic Furs, like punk bands, like going from punk to indie pop to classical. It allows you to musical theater. It allows you to keep, straddling different lines.
This is the benefit of a well-rounded education.
Yeah.
This is the benefit that you get from exposure to all these different things at a young age.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why, whenever I see, young parents or whatever, I tell them, beautiful kid. You've got like from now until like 11 to like show them the world, right? And
Yeah.
after that, they know everything, right?
Right,
You know,
right.
but like the more you just, even if they don't like it, you know, just to have your iris widened, you
Just
know,
get them exposed to it,
just,
see if they want to do it.
Yeah.
Let them try karate. Let them try,
Yeah.
you know, beating on a drum
you
or,
have
let
to,
'em- or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
yeah, and being given free reign to indulge your curiosity, you know, wherever it leads you is you know is that this is what you get from doing that. I benefited from that that kind of education, that kind of upbringing.
Yeah. So where you are now, what are you working on right now?
I've been doing a lot of work in virtual reality, actually. VR is kind of like my film studio. I'm not a gamer at all. I use it to actually build
The
sets.
Oculus? Are you doing
I
the
haven't.
Oculus?
Yeah, I've
I haven't
had
tried that yet.
Yeah, there's. Well, I actually built like a VR prototype in 1993 before there even was like QuickTime.
It was called
VR
the
and stuff.
Coleman.
There's a video about it on YouTube. The code still compiles on my desktop, but you can't play it anymore because it was all done in Macromedia Director. And you know, we haven't talked enough about how like an entire generation, an entire platform of the world's art, you know, just like got vaporized when Adobe killed Flash. You know,
Right.
one company just like wiped out all that stuff. The Johnny Cash project, all kinds of great stuff just gone overnight. You know. Wow. Yeah, well, that was the second time that happened. The first time was with the Director and all the stuff that I did with CD-ROMs and all that business back in the early 90s.
Well, CD-ROM was big. I
Yeah.
mean, that was like supposed to be the next thing.
Yeah, like I said, I worked on the very first one, which was the Macmillan Dictionary for Children, and I was the voice of the animated character.
We had a
It was,
gateway or
crazy.
a computer or whatever that played ROMs and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So
Yeah.
I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, it seems like a lot of fun has gone out of you know, tech exploration. Maybe it'll open up now with
It
the
does
next
seem
wave with the
tedious.
metaverse and the next.
It
thing
seems
that'll
like you
happen.
have to learn so much. Like I feel like there's like you have to like I feel intimidated by you know, the Adobe Premiere Suite, like Lightbox and everything else. It's like, holy crap, I got to learn all this crap. Like I don't have time to invest. Like I need a mentor to take me through all this stuff. And I felt like it wasn't that way 30 years ago where you're kind of like, okay, you could take a class, sure, but it was a little more paint by numbers than before. So I feel personally intimidated by a lot of the technology out there now. So and then you have like people pushing out like, no, it's so easy. It's just an app. And it's like, it's never so. First words to tell you it's not easy when they say it's just a some ...
Yeah, no, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. No, I totally
Yeah,
sympathize with that. I taught myself everything.
So is the
yeah.
VR world, because you're an accomplished, you know, technician, is the VR world getting quote unquote easier? Do you think like, because like, you know, they're hosting concerts in the World of Warcraft and things like that. Like people are trying to push people to like the virtual realms, having avatars, whatnot, to lead a quote unquote better life. Experience better
You know,
things.
it's the next evolution of the internet. It's just the internet in 3D and 360 basically is what it is ultimately. It's everything, all of it, and then some, and then the next things, which is that you'll be able to treat 3D objects the same way that we handle JPEGs and MPEGs right now. It'll be like that kind of casual and that kind of everyday.
That'll be in your signature
know.
line of your email instead of a JPEG.
thing,
It's gonna rotate and come out of the screen and grab your
head and say, "Hi, how are you?" You know?
like Max Headroom. Remember that?
Yeah, there's going to be all kinds of crazy stuff. There's going to be like, I think there'll be like future polymers, like smart fabrics that like you'll be able to reach out and touch things that aren't actually there, or like hug somebody halfway around the world or more. You know, it's all
Reach
kinds
out
of.
and touch some.
But
But what about music? How's it going to work with music?
So it's complicated. The thing about like trying to do live performance in virtual space is that the latency inherent in the system is like really basically kind of impossible to get past. So what you can do is kind of like all play together and present it to everybody else, you know, rather than try, you know, even with the fastest bandwidth, you know, go yell at a mountain and how soon does the echo come back?
Right.
It's just physics. But the ability to have these concerts, and you can basically be anywhere in the world and yet be in the best seat in the house at this concert, that's got a lot of attraction to it.
Right.
Both business-wise and artistically. Right, because you know especially trying to do something niche-wise, your audience could be 1,000, 2,000 people scattered all over the world, but that's enough to do a gig, you know, to sustain.
And
yourself,
the gig's actually
you know?
happening. Saying that the Red Hot Chili Peppers are playing at Red Rocks or something, they'll actually put cameras up all along, and they'll sell the subscription to your VR channel, and that's where it's going, right?
That's one way of doing it. There's multiple models. That's one of them. Right?
Yeah.
And the other is like completely synthetic experiences that can only be had inside the environment itself.
Okay.
You know, what I've been doing is using it's kind of like halfway between painting and sculpting, where I'm actually building sets, and you can go like this, and you can actually kind of shrink and expand the entire world.
Okay.
So like you can build something in miniature and then like this.
So the God complex you're trying to tell us here a little bit.
It's really a lot of fun. It's really, really fun. The idea that, I mean, the thing is that kind of like the difference between being in a car, being on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
In a car, you're looking out the window. In a motorcycle, you're in it.
Right.
Right? In a computer, you're looking through the window there. In VR, you're in it.
Right.
You know?
You're participating.
And it's all around you. It's an entire, all your sense organs are immersed in this environment that obeys a slightly different set of laws of physics. You draw something in the air and it stays there.
Cool.
And you can grab a hold of it and go, and come back tomorrow and it'll still be there.
Well, do you still enjoy playing live?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah,
are you
sure.
Are you still doing that?
I'm in 5 bands.
Only 5? What's we don't have time for all.
I know.
What's the best of the 5 bands that you enjoy?
So
right now?
You mentioned John Ashton. I've been playing with John Ashton since 2014, and that's been fantastic. We've got one album out called Satellite Paradiso. That's basically the name of the group, and there's like 20 some odd musicians on it. I play with a band in Boston called the Bent Men, who are sort of like a cross between Blue Man Group and Tool. And have been around for 40 years. And
actually, that's the same band now I think about it. Blue Man Group and Tool have been the same band
The
forever.
Residents, Killing Joke, Captain Beefheart, like really heavy.
Wow.
Yeah, that band. And my first gig with them was on 10 days' notice in front of 40,000 people. And then there's my own project, Secret Agent, secretagentband.com.
Yes.
And we got one album out called Declassified, and the new one coming called Redacted, and all the song titles on Redacted are blacked out.
Of course.
And I've been releasing them one at a time.
So you just go
getting
number
airplay.
1 or number 2 or number 3,
I
right?
do. I toss them up on at least 01, 02, 03, but
you have to give them a number at least.
Yeah. If you were of a mind to, you could figure it out. If you delved into it, you could conceivably figure it out. There's lots of layers to Secret
There's
Agent.
some zeros and ones to be decoded like the
I can
Matrix
neither
in this
confirm
thing.
nor deny.
Yes, exactly. That's the problem when you have someone who's
Yeah.
the tech genius over here and
Yeah, I
also
can neither
musical
confirm
genius.
nor deny.
Well, let's go right to it, and then we're giving the ladies and gentlemen something a little virtual through our podcast here. In lieu of putting on a full concert, either virtually or in person, let's share our listeners a taste of Frank's talents here. He's playing 15 different styles in 5 minutes, live, recorded on Dyckman Plaza here in Inwood, New York City. Enjoy, Frank Coleman. So that's a lot of styles in a very short time.
Yeah,
and
it
so
is.
I can see how all those would become very useful for all the 5 bands you're in right now.
Yeah.
and maybe you don't play all the styles for all the bands.
Well,
but,
Secret Agent alone is
Yeah.
original music that sounds like it's supposed to be in a spy movie. So that right there is jazz, funk, Latin, dub, Bollywood,
Sure.
surf, rock and roll.
Yeah.
All mixed up in a
You're your own.
big
You're
bucket of
your own
piranhas.
Bond diaspora.
Kinda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Frank, awesome stuff. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
It's my
I feel like we
pleasure.
could talk for hours about any of the given things we've kind of touched on. But before we say goodbye, where can we send people to find out more about your current and forthcoming offerings?
My various misadventures.
Yes.
Well, my website is frank-coleman.com. FRANK-COLEMAN.
And it does work,
.com.
and it's not like you have to it's not a trick website.
No, it's not one of the. It doesn't take you to the residence version of never gonna whatever.
Okay.
Frank-Coleman.com, and my partner is BambiEverson.com.
There you go.
You can find either one of us through the other, and we're on all the usual suspects of the social media outlets.
Very cool. Well, Frank, we'll
Get-atable.
put the description in our episodes so people can.
Thanks so much.
Right.
We love Inwood. We love being here.
Well, we love
great.
having you, man. Thanks for
And,
being part of our community.
Yeah, man. Thank you for everything you do, because that's what's needed. Is if you don't tell them, they can't come.
We use art as a platform to bring people together. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And thanks for noticing, and thanks for being part of the community here. That's what it's all
Right on.
about. So we'll find a time to get you out there too, and we'll get you playing live at some point with maybe your 6th band. Who knows?
We'll see.
So
It's always spontaneously erupt at any moment.
exactly. So thanks again to Frank Coleman for joining me on this special Artist Spotlight episode of Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes that make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now by rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us. Many thanks to Church of Good Shepherd, and also for hightest.com for uptown promotional support. You can support On Air and all of our programming by giving a tax-free donation at inwoodartworks.nyc/donate or via Venmo. Be sure to follow us on social media at Inwood Art Works to keep up all that we do, including the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Al Fresco, art galleries, live performances, and so much more. Inwood Art Works On Air is proud to be supported by public funds from the New York State Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Art Works On Air.